Hey, good evening. Hope, Rob, you got it? Okay, good, Baruch Hashem. Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Zevachim Daf Kuf Yud Beis, and we are starting at the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, a new Mishnah. Nimir Hashem will finish the parak, and I would say quite uniquely, when we do start the new parak, that Mishnah spans a full Amud. It's extremely long, and in fact, it is the last Mishnah of the parak. All of the following Gemaras are based on that Mishnah, but there won't be another Mishnah from here to the end of the parak. It just stacks. It stacks all the Mishnahs together, and then from Daf Kuf Yud Gimel to the end of the parak on Kuf Chaf, there will be no more Mishnahs. So we will be learning our last Mishnah today, Afal Pi that we have another week to go. Okay, let's learn this new Mishnah. The Mishnah says toward the bottom of Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, Chatas, if you have a korban chatas, shekibel dama bekos echad, that the kabbalas adam was done in a singular kli. And now we're going to see a bunch of cases based on the dam having been received in one kli. If nasan bachutz, if you did a zrika outside where you shouldn't have done the zrika, that's not where zrika is done. And then v'chazar v'nasan bifnim, and then you go back into the Beis Hamikdash, into the right place, and you do the zrika by the yesod, by wherever you're supposed to do the zrika, depending on the korban. So then the halacha is, as we will see soon, that you're going to be chayiv. So if it's nasan bachutz v'chazar v'nasan bifnim, or bifnim v'chazar v'nasan b'chutz chayiv, shekulo ra'oi bifnim, none of it should have ever been brought outside. All this is with one cup. However, if we switch to two cups, if kibel dama b'shtei kosos, not like the first case, but rather here the blood was niskabel in two kosos from the actual moment of shchita, the kabbalas hadam. So if nasan shnehem bifnim pater, obviously if you do both inside, it's pater. It's very strange we even talk about this case. That's what you're supposed to do. That's the mitzvah. That's not where the chiddush is in this second ukimta, in this second stanza of the Mishnah. But if you did shnei and bachutz, you'd be chayiv. That tracks a little bit. And then here's a little bit of a quirky din. Echad bifnim ve'echad bachutz pater. If the first kos that you did was inside, and the second kos you did was outside, then you're pater on that latter one. Now this is different. If you have one cup, and you do part of the one cup inside, part one outside, no good. But if you have two kosos, and the first cup you did inside, you're already yotze, you're done already. So then to take the second cup would function more as shirayim. Now, continuing in this second stanza of the Mishnah, where we're talking about having received in two cups, if you did echad bachutz, if first you did one cup outside, echad bifnim, then we would split and we would say chayev ala chitzon ve'apnimi mechaper. Right? We split the two cups. We can't split the one cup, but we can split the two cups. Good. Lema hadover dome. What is this comparable to? So the Gemara pulls out of left field. We would never have made this hashva. So the Gemara says, this is no different than lemafresh chataso ve'avda, someone who separates an animal for a korban chatas that they're obligated to bring, and then they lost the animal. So I lost animal A for my chatas, and I replaced it with animal B. And then v'achar kach nimtzeis harishona. Then we find animal number one. V'harei shtehen omdos. Both of them are now ready for shchita. We have animal A that was lost, and then I highlighted. Then I found B. Now I have everything all ready. So if shachat shtehen bifnim pater, like we saw above by the two kosos, we're only talking about the second case right now. The case of the shtei kosos of the chatas is comparable to the shtei animals that are omdos. That I had my animal A, and then I lost it, found animal, I then selected animal B, then I found animal A. So this second case of the Mishnah of Kibel Dama B'Shtei Kosos is comparable to this case of V'harei Shtehen Omdos. And then Shtehen B'chutz Chayv, if I shecht both of these animals, the original animal A of the Chatas, and then the replacement, the Mosar animal, was shechted outside, you would be Chayiv. And achas bifnim, achas bachutz pater. If I did one inside, that was my actual chatas that I needed to do, good to go. And if I did one outside, that was my mosar animal. Achas bachutz v'achas bifnim. If it was flipped, if I did one outside and then I did one inside. All of this is to say that this is a beautiful mashal. It's not a mashal that compares it because halachically they're similar, because they're not, but the halachos of the iterations of one bifnim, one outside, one outside, one inside, the same exact halachos as the case of mafresh, a mafresh chatas v'avda v'hifresh acheres tachta. And the last din of the Mishnah, second to last line on Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, the Gemara says, "Kishem shedama poter es besara," just like the blood of an animal enables the meat, right? It potters the meat. Kachi poteres es besar chaverta. It could also potter its besar chaverta, meaning if the blood that you have in one cup can help the blood from another cup in regards to me'ila. So that means once I do kapara with kos A, then there's no longer a din of me'ila with kos B, which is pretty interesting because they're not really connected by blood. So now the Gemara is bothered on the top of Kuf Yud Beis, Amud Aleph. I understand the case, says the Gemara, Bishlama bifnim, Bishlama bachutz, excuse me, v'chazer v'nasim bifnim. I understand why that case is going to be chayav shekulo roilios bifnim. If you started on this is talking about the first case of the Mishnah, where you only receive the blood in one cup. I understand if you pour a little bit, you do zrikas hadam from the one cup outside first and inside second, the whole thing's an error. You can't split what you do in one cup. Aval, bifnim v'helan bachutz. Once you do the zrika bifnim, and then, again, we're talking about one cup here. If you only have one cup and you start bifnim, then why would we say that there's a problem with that? After all, shirayim ninhu. The rest of the blood in cup, when you're done, you did your zrikat sadam already. Hamani, whose shita does this seem to be like? It sounds like it's Reb Nechemyahi. The Amar, as we saw on Shabbos, shiur hadam shehi krivan bachutz chayev. I could understand. This all sounds like classic Reb Nechemya territory, who holds that shirayim are me'akev. That I understand. The problem is that if Reb Nechemya, if really this first case, this first stanza of the Mishnah is Reb Nechemya territory, then a Masefa, when we get to the second stanza of our Mishnah, which says, Kibel dama b'shnei kosos nasan shneim b'fnim pater, shneim b'chutz chayev, echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz pater, then this case of echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz pater, that's not true. Because what does Reb Nechemya hold? V'ha'amar Reb Nechemya, shi'ari hadam shekriv b'chutz chayev. If you're saying that the Reisha is Reb Nechemya, and that's why when there's one cup, even if you start inside and do the rest outside, I understand. It's Reb Nechemya territory. Okay, I did the first Zrika inside. But it's only one cup, so if I continue after Shiari Hadam, you're going to be chayiv on if you do Bachutz, because that's the Ikuva. But the second case doesn't have the same din. The second stanza, where the blood is received in two cups, the din is not that way. It says echad bifnim ve'echad b'chutz pater. Should be chayiv if it's Rav Nechemya territory. The Gemara says you're right. Seifa, a son l'tana kama de Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon. This is according to the Chachamim within the shita. That's the arguing shita against Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon that we saw in multiple places in Shas to Amar kos osa dichui lechavero. That if you have two cups and you already did something with the first cup, it's docha the second cup. That's why you're pater. When you're dealing with two cups, once you use the first cup, the second cup is done for. So therefore, you went outside and sprinkled pater, because kos osa dichui lechavero. So in order to understand our Mishnah, we need some lamdas. We need the Reisha to be Reb Nechemya, who says that shiurei hadam is me'akev, and therefore, even if within one cup, even if you start your kapara inside and then you do a little bit of that one cup outside, you're chayiv because shiurei hadam is me'akev. And the Seifa is not Reb Nechemya. The Seifa requires us to deviate from Reb Nechemya and hold like the shita of the Chachamim within the Brais of Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, who holds kos osa dichui lechavero. Kafto braferach, very clear part of the Gemara. So far, we understand the Reisha and we understand the second case, the Seifa.
Two different types of halachos. Like still, it's still
you're asking the right question that the Rishonim have to deal with. I didn't look, but I thought about I didn't think about it as articulately as you just said, but it did strike me that it doesn't mean it's not Reb Nechemya. It just means there's an overlay that's kicking in to say maybe we hold that shiurei hadam are me'akev. but it's not shaykh here because with shtei kosos, it's kos osa tichui lechavero. It could be that even the seifa holds like Reb Nechemia. It's just not relevant, but
But you're saying, I think makes sense.
oh.
You never get to that question because it's already a do. I guess. What I don't know is, because I don't know Kudshim, which one overtakes which? Shirayim versus Deep, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But evidently deeply overtakes.
There's a little note. There's a little note on the side of the Shita Mekubetzes. If you have it there, I think it's touching on this. Amre man tana de polig aled Reb Elazar Reb Shimon of kos ose chaveru dichui Reb Nechemyahi. So that presentation is not the case. That presentation seems to say that there's a direct machlokas about whether or not Reb Nechemya holds about kos rishon dichui lechaveru. And if he argues on Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, then Reisha is Reb Nechemya and Seifa is not Reb Nechemya. But I could see, and I went quickly in my head through what you were hinting to, which is I could see this going two ways, and then I moved on. But I think the way you asked it was perfect. But this little shita mekubetzes, assuming that it's actually that it makes it through the postgame, then it's definitely Reisha Reb Nechemya, and Seifa is the Tanakama of Reb Elazar. Is it Reb Elazar Reb Shimon? The Tanakama of Reb Elazar Reb Shimon. Beautiful. Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, here we have some different girsos. It's either my lemah damer dome or lemah damer dome lamali. But basically, what is this comparison? Rashi has the first girsa that I presented, not the one that's here. And if you look in the Meforshim here, it says my lemah damer dome. That's what Rashi says. And says the Gemara, Hamani, who is this shita like, this comparison? It must be that it's according to Rebbe. The Amar avud b'shas hafrasha mesa, that if you have an animal that was lost at the time of hafrasha, that it needs to die. V'achikamar ta'ama de'avda. The only reason that's true is because the animal was lost. But look at this diuk. Ha'hifrish techatos lachratz. Let's say you're a little type A, and you know that sometimes animals get lost. You know what you do? You take out two animals out of the gates to be a chatas for you. One of them, should it not be used for a chatas, will be an ola, and the other one, hopefully, won't get lost. But if it does, the other one will be used as a chatas. So that's for the type A people. The Rav Huna Amar Rav, asham shenitak l're'iyah. If you have an asham that is put out to graze, ushchato stam kasher la'ola, and it was to be shechted stam, so that can function as an ola. So what the Gemara is saying is that our case of chatas, where one of the chatos can function as an ola, is similar to the case of an asham, where an asham can function as an ola. The Gemara says, no, you can't compare chatas ola and asham ola. Why not? Midami. Hasam asham zachar ve'ola zachar. I understand the case of Rav Huna Marav, where you say that perhaps one of the animals is going to be an ola because they're both the appropriate gendered animal. An asham's a zachar and an ola is a zachar. Aval chatas nekevahi. So how could the din of Rav Huna Amar Rav be true if you want to say that, we just picked out two animals and one of them will be an ola? Wrong gender. The animal's a female. If you picked out a chatas, it's a female. So says the Gemara, you're 100% right. End of the perek. Amaruchia miyustinia b'sa'ir nasi. We're talking about a sa'ir nasi, which has the status of a chatas, but it is in fact a zachar. And because it's a zachar, we now are able to make a full comparison. But correct, it's true that if you were to have picked out two animals that were chataos, two chatas animals, and you said one's going to be an olah, that would actually be difficult because the gender of the animal is wrong. Hadron Allah hashoched v'amale baruch Hashem. We finished the 13th perek of Maseches Zevachim, turning to our final perek, the 14th perek, which will take us to the end of this Masechta in Yirtzeh Hashem in about a week's time. I think it's next Monday. Rabbi Yitz pointed out to me. Good, Baruch Hashem, we finished this perek. Yiratzon, we should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. And the rest from here is, let's call it coasting for the night, which is a bit of a treat. We don't get to coast so much. And half of this Mishnah is historical, about bamos, the stages of bamos, when we were, where we were, when bamos were allowed. We'll get a little bit into the difference between bamos yachid and bamos tzibur. but we're just going to do pretty high level because the Gemara is going to analyze all of this. So we're going to learn this like we would any other Mishnah. The new Mishnah opens, the new parak opens on Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 2/3 of the way down. Let's say you were taking care of the para aduma, the para schatas shesarfa chutz migita. You did the shchita outside of the gita. We'll learn about this lashon in the Gemara, but it's outside of the appropriate place. We know that it was outside of the eastern door of the mikdash. We learned when we were learning these sugyas earlier in Shas that maybe you could see through the. We were discussing how tall the door was. Could you see the heichal through the top part of the door, or was the door shorter? Were we higher on the mountain? You were seeing over. These were discussions back in the day. But if you were in the wrong place, you were in Chicago, you're in Beersheba, wherever you were. So the Gemara will deal with what the halacha is in a moment. We'll see that you're pater if you do the para adum in the wrong place. V'chein similarly, si'ir hamishtalech. Sir Mishalech, we know what happened to the Sir Mishalech. But if you were shehikriv bachutz, you shechted it outside of the Makam HaMikdash Pater, shenamar ve'el Pesach Ohel Moed lo hiviu, kol she'ein roi lavo el Pesach Ohel Moed ein chayav and alav. These korbanos are not brought in the Beis HaMikdash. The Para Aduma is not taken care of in the Beis HaMikdash. The Sir Mishalech is also not taken care of. So now you shechted them. Okay, you're Pater. It's not good, but you're Pater. Ha-roveya v'ha-nirba. The roveya is the male animal that is roveya, a woman. The ha-nirba is a female animal that was sodomized by a person. V'ha-muksa, an animal set aside for avodah zarah. V'ha-nevad, an animal that was worshipped for avodah zarah. V'ha-mechir, something sold for a dog. V'ha-esnan, something that was used as payment for a zona. V'ha-kilaim, animals that were mated incorrectly. V'ha-trefa, v'yotze dofin, an animal that was born via C-section. Sheikrivan bachutz, in all of these cases, if they were shechted outside of the appropriate place in the Makam HaMikdash, pater. Shene'emar lifnei Mishkan Hashem. What's the drasha? Kol she'ein roi lavo lifnei Mishkan Hashem. All of these korbanos, no, it's not shaykh. It's not kavadik to bring these into the Beis HaMikdash. So because it's not shaykh, therefore ein chayav and alav. Clean, very good. Last line of Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, Ba'alei Mumin. If you have animals that have a mum, they have blemishes. Bein ba'alei mumin kvuin. If they have a permanent blemish, turning to the top of Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, bein ba'alei mumin ovrin, even if it's temporary. As you can see, there's no Tosfos on this page. It's all Rashis of these very short things. Great, beautiful Rashis to look at when you have time. We're not going to do them now. Ba'alei mumin ovrin, sheikrivan bachutz pater. Rav Shimon makes a distinction when it comes to Ba'alei Mumin. He says, Ba'alei Mumin kavu in our pater, but Ba'alei Mumin overin, chai below sa'aseh. He says, no dice, and we'll see in the Gemara why that's true, as to why it is that he holds that way. Torim, if you have birds, shalohi giyazmanan, young birds, they were shechted too early. Uvnei Yona, turtle dove, she'avar zmanan, that were shechted when they were too old. Sheikrivan bachutz pater. Reb Shimon Omer, bnei Yona, she'avar zmanan pater, but b'torim shalohi giyazmanan below sa'aseh. That's an Isser Deoraisa. Next, Oso ve'espino, we know, as is darshan in the Gemara in Chulin, and it's a pasuk in Chumash as well, that Oso ve'espino, a mother and its animal in the cow family or in the animal family are not to be shechted on the same day. The Torah was chas and said it's not right. So if you did that, or mechusar zman, an animal that was mechusar zman, we're going to speak about that more in a moment. In those cases, if you did that, you are pater. Reb Shimon Omer hareze below saseh. Those cases are below saseh. Why are they below saseh? Reb Shimon Omer kol shu roi lavo la'achar zman. If they could eventually be brought, then you're not pater. That's hareze below saseh ve'ein bo kares. Also, ve'espino is only problematic when the two of them are brought together. But if you bring one today and one tomorrow, no problem. So since the achar zman, they can be brought. Mechusar zman, wait till the animal's old enough. Just don't do it now. Wait till the animal's old enough. So because the achar zman, Reb Shimon holds that those are below saseh. Mechusar zman was talking about a korban. You're not allowed to do a korban within 7 days of birth of the animal. Bein begufo, whether the animal was not old enough. Bein bebailav, or if it had to do with something in regards to the bailam. And what does that mean? Simple. Hazav v'hazava hayoledes v'amitzora. In all of these cases, zav and zava we know are these maladies, some type of discharge that indicated some spiritual illness. V'hayoledes, a woman who had given birth. V'hamitzora, someone who had to wait through their period of mitzora. and they are not done yet. And if she krivan chatas and ashamam bachutz, their chatas and their asham, if they were karev, those things outside of the makom hamikdash, the halacha is pater. But olos sein v'shalmein bachutz, their olos and their shlamim, again, chatas and asham one side of the line, olos and shlamim on the other, those are chayavin. Hamal mi besar chatas, if anybody takes out the meat of a chatas, mi besar asham, the meat of an asham, mi besar koche kochem, the meat of the koche kochem, mi besar kochem kalim, umosar haomer, the extras from the korban omer, Ushtei lechem, or the two showbreads, lechem apanim, the shavuos bread and the lechem apanim, ushiyare menachos, the extras of a mincha, v'hayotzek, this is someone who pours oil, v'haposes, that's the crumbling of certain korbanos mincha, v'habolel, one who mixes flour with oil, v'hamoleach, one who pours salt, v'hamenif, one who moves around certain korbanos, v'hamegish, one who places them near the Beis HaMikdash, v'hamisader es ha-shulchan, one who organizes the breads on the shulchan in the heichal, v'hameitiv es ha-neiros, one who cleans the neiros, v'hakometz, one who does kmitza, v'hamakabel damim. If you did any of these, bachutz, halacha is your pater. And that's what the Gemara says, your pater. Ve'ein chayavin alav lo mishum zaros. And all of these cases where you did these things, this previous list of things that were done bachutz, if they were done bizarus with a non-kohen, that would not be chayiv. V'lo mishum tuma, if the kohen was tama, you wouldn't be chayiv. V'lo mishum mechusar begadim, if you weren't wearing enough of the appropriate kohen clothes, you would not be chayiv. V'lo mishum shelo rachutz yadayim b'raglayim, if you didn't do the tahara for your hands. And all of that is the halachos of the Mishnah, the first half of the Mishnah, the halachic parts of them, in regards to what you are not, and in some cases, and what you are chayiv for if you do so bachutz. We're now halfway down on Kuf Yud Beis and Mid Beis. We're totally going to be switching gears here, and now we're going to learn the historical levels of when bamos were mutter and when they were not mutter. This is like a Shas Mishnah that we should know and know it well, because bamos do come up. Most of the time that bamos come up, we're clueless about it, because when they say, oh, it's time of Shiloh, it's time of Gilgal, this Mishnah is going to tell us all of the history. Says the Mishnah, halfway down on Kuf Yud Beis Mid Beis, Ad shelo hukam ha-mishkan, before the Mishkan was built for the first time, hayu ha-bamos mutaros ve'avoda bebechoros. Bamos were allowed. These are, non-Mishkan types of korban fires. That was totally allowed, no problem. And they would do avoda with bechoros, with firstborn animals. Umishehukama Mishkan, but once the first Mishkan was built, nesru habamos, you're not allowed to have those bamos anymore. And then we switched from everyone being able to bring korbanos to ve'avoda bekohanim. That was our first introduction to Kohanim, was when the first Mishkan was built. And during that tkufa, when the bamos were mutaros, the animals that were of the higher caliber of Kedusha were only eaten within a certain space. And v'kachim kalim b'chol machna Yisrael. The lighter foods, Korban Pesach was one of them, but shlamim, different kinds of kachim kalim, they could be eaten anywhere within Machna Yisrael. They weren't limited as to where they could be eaten, like the kachay kachim, which could only be eaten within the claim. All of that is stage one. Ba'u Gilgal, which was when Yoshua was about to take the Jews into Eretz Yisrael, Hutru habamos, it was again mutter for there to be bamos, and again, kachay kachim ne'echalan lifnei min aklayim, the kachim kalim b'chol makom. And then Ba'u l'Shilo, where the Mishkan stood for quite a long time, Ne'esu habamos. Once we had that Mishkan, which was long-standing, then the bamos were not allowed. And that Mishkan in Shiloh was interesting. V'lo haya sham tikra. There actually was no proper roof over the Mishkan in Shiloh. Ela beis avanim bilvad milamatan. The walls, the lower parts of the building were built out of stone. V'hayurios milamalan. And there were these cloths, these sheets that were kind of toward the top, but it was an open roof. V'hi haisa menucha. Right, the language we have as el hamenucha ve'el hanachala. So that's what the word menucha refers to over here, is the Mishkan in Shiloh. And in the Mishkan in Shiloh, 2/3 of the way down, kachay kachim ne'echalin lifnei min aklayim, v'kachay kachim kalim meiser sheni, because where were we now? We were in Eretz Yisrael, so we had a din of meiser sheni, feathering in new halachos, new applicable halachos. And that was true. You could eat Meiser Sheni B'chol Haroeh as long as you could see the Mishkan in Shiloh, you were good to go. Bo Lenov V'Givon during the times of Eli HaKohen, Huchu Abamos, it was again mutter for there to be Bamos in the times of Eli. And at that time, Koche Kochem by the Bamos were Ne'echal and Lifnim and Aklayim Kochem Kalim B'chol Arei Yisrael. Boli Yerushalayim. Once we got to Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash was built, Ne'esru Habamos forever. That's why we're not allowed to have them now. V'lo haya lehen heter. After that point, we weren't allowed to build them anymore. And in fact, the language that's added over here by the Shita Mekubetzes is v'lo haya lehen od heter. There was no more going to be a heter for Bamos. That was it. First Beis Hamikdash was built. We're done. That's it. V'hi ha'isa nachala. Ela menucha ve'ela nachala. So menucha was Shiloh. Nachala was the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. And in Yerushalayim, what was the din? Koche kochem ne'echal and lifnim min aklayim. Kochem kalim meiser sheni lifnim min achoma. Now we get more nuance, which is the walls of the old city, or the walls of Yerushalayim, I should say. Good. Continues the Mishnah 3/4 of the way down, about 15 lines from the bottom. Kol ha-kodshim sheikdishon b'shas iser habamos. Let's say that you had kodshim that was sanctified during a time of iser bamos. V'hikrivon b'shas iser habamos, but mibachutz. You also tried to bring it at a time of iser bamos, but not in the place where bamos were brought. You did it bachutz. Harei elu be'aseh v'lo sa'aseh v'chayavan alav kares. Yikes. That's today. If I tried to be makdish an animal and say this is kodshim, and I just shecht it, you get an iser aseh, a los aseh, and seemingly a chiyuv kares. That's not geshmak. You should avoid that. Hekdeshan b'shas heter habamos. Let's say, well intended. I wasn't trying to be an avarian. It was a time when bamos were mutter, and I sanctified an animal to donate to the donate to the bamos. So it's b'shas habamos, but v'hikrivan b'shas iser habamos bachutz. But nebach, the bamos were then restricted, and now I have this animal and I want to bring it, and I bring it bachutz. It's not brought near a bama. Hare'elu be'aseh v'los aseh ve'ein chayavan alehen kares. Always got to know where the line is for kares. So here the line is that it wasn't kares because we were makdish the animal at a time where bamos were mutter. But if you were makdish at a time where if you were makdish at a time when bamos were not mutter, then you're chayiv kares. Next case, 8 lines from the bottom. Hekdeshan b'shas iser habamos. Let's say that you were makdish the animal at a time when bamos were not allowed. And v'hikrivan b'shas heter habamos. That's fine. So what is the halacha there? You actually shechted it at the right time. Hare'elu be'aseh ve'ein bahen lo saseh. That's only an iser aseh, because you shouldn't have done the being makdish the animal during a time of iser bamos. That you shouldn't have done. Ve'elu kodshim kreven b'mishkan. The following are the kodshim that were shechted by the Mishkan. Kodshim shehuktashu l'mishkan. Korbanos tzibur, korbanos mishkan. So this is talking about cases of animals that were kodshim, that were huktashu to the Mishkan, and korbanos tzibur that were shechted in the Mishkan. The korbanos hayachid bebama. What about the korbanos hayachid by a bama? Korbanos hayachid huktashu leMishkan yakrivu b'mishkan. The halacha is that if you have korbanos hayachid that were makdish to the Mishkan, they should only be shechted in the Mishkan. If you have a korban yachid that you dedicated to the Mishkan, and you in fact incorrectly did the shchita by a bama, the halacha is your pater. Asks the Gemara toward the bottom of Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, and we're going to stop at the Gemara on the top of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Uma bein bamas yachid lebamas tzibur. What is the difference between the bama of an individual and the bama of a tzibur? The answer is quite a few halachos. By a bamas tzibur, different halachos apply. Smicha, ushchita tzafon. You can only do shchita in the north for certain korbanos. Umatan saviv utnufa v'hagasha, and doing the korbanos on all the corners, and tnufa is moving around the animals, v'hagasha, putting certain things on the mizbeach. And Ri-Omer, Ein Mincha Bebama. He says there is no Korban Mincha by Bamas Yachid. The Gemara is going to say where he learns this from. Ubig Day Shares, no din for Big Day Shares, for Kli Shares. The Reach Nichoach, which is that it can't be roasted first, you have to put it up raw. Umechitza Ledamim was talking about the Chut HaSekra only applies in certain cases. He says they don't apply here. The Richutz Yadayim V'Raglaim, no washing hands. Aval. Hazman, the timing of a korban, hanosar, which is an expiration date, v'hatame, shavim bazeh uvazeh, that's the same by abamas yachid and by abamas tzibur. And starting tomorrow in Mirz Hashem, we'll start picking apart this very, very lengthy Mishnah so that we can have more clarity on all of the halachos within. Wishing you all a beautiful night.